Welcome, Forensic Biology. Today we will be taking part 2 of our Forensic Entomology, Chapter 11. We will be covering insects and decomposition. We will be going over blowflies, looking at those, especially their growth and development, going over some different changes or morphology of the body. So we'll be talking about that. As well as other insects as well, house flies, flesh flies, coffin flies, and finally beetles. So that's pretty much going to cover our topics for today. Remember, this is part 2 of chapter 11, entomology. Okay, so the first part is we're going to discuss decomposition. Now, the understanding of this is based off the decomposition stages of a body, of a dead body. So your body is going to go through these decomposition stages, and as it goes through these stages, it's going to provide environment, resources for said animals. Okay, those animals being flies, beetles, things like that, insects for the most part. Okay. So first off, you have the first stage, that being what is called fresh. Okay, so fresh is a newly warm or a warm or newly dead body. This is going to attract animals that don't necessarily have teeth, that can use what is called a proboscis or something to kind of suck up the easier soft tissue. Second stage being bloated. This corpse is going to be emitting odors from the decaying flesh. So those odors, that are going to be released, are going to attract other types of animals. Then you have decay. Okay, so a body emitting gases of decay with strong odors and showing signs of darkened tissues. Pretty much the tissue is dying. So you got a lot kind of going on. Then you have what is active decay or advanced decay. So an organism starting to dry out. Most flesh is gone by this time, so your soft tissue, for the most part, at least the outer part of your soft tissue, that being your flesh, skin, that is going to be gone by this time. Then you have finally dry or skeletal decay, and that is mostly bones that are going to remain. Now remember, at each of these stages, you're going to pretty much recruit new animals. And the reason for that is because these are creating different habitats. Okay, remember, a habitat is what supports these animals. So in order for an animal to survive in a habitat, it must have food, it must have ample or ambient conditions, or conditions it can live in, temperature, moisture, things like that, as well as being able to reproduce. So as your body changes through decomposition, you are creating new habitats for the different types of insects that are going to feed on a decomposing body. So that's pretty much the stages. We'll go into the first part of it. I told you that flesh blowflies are going to be the most abundant. So you can see kind of an idea here of what's going on. You have multiple bottleflies, blowflies, they're the same thing. And then they're laying eggs. So let's get into blowflies. Remember, blowflies is pretty much the guideline to what is going to be used. All right. After minutes after minutes after death, the body is going to release chemicals. Those chemicals being putrescine and cadaverine. All right, and a blowfly can actually smell these from a mile away. So that's pretty much indicating that there is a decomposing body and therefore a food source. So therefore, blowflies, adult blowflies, are going to arrive and then kind of take over and do what they are going to do. Now, what you need to understand, here's the proboscis. This is pretty much their mouth, if you want to call it that. It's kind of like a hose. They're just going to use this, or a trunk, like an elephant kind of trunk. They're just going to use it to kind of suck up the protein-rich fluids from the decomposing body, and also the female will deposit their eggs. Now, because of the environment, they need an environment in which is moist. Okay, it's pretty controlled, and it's kind of away from predators and things like that. So a blowfly is going to deposit eggs in openings of the body, so nose, ear, mouth, vagina, anus, things like that, or in any other kind of a wound of the body that creates an opening. So it will deposit in that. So once the eggs are deposited, okay, they're about 2 millimeters long. They kind of look like a grain of rice. Each female will deposit about 50 eggs or so. They will then release a kind of another pheromone, signaling other blowflies to be able to deposit eggs there as well. So that way you get more than that. All right. So that's pretty much the first part of the metamorphosis of blowflies. All right. We're going to go into this a little bit more. So I want to show you kind of what a blowfly looks like. All right. These are called, also known as blowflies, bottleflies, or carrion flies. So those are all the same type of animals. They're kind of a shiny metallic blue or bronze. So here's this blue or green, blue-green kind of color, or a bronze one there. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the growth and development of the said blowflies. All right, because this is the important part. This is what you're going to use in order to create a post-mortem interval. So this is what they're going to use. Okay. So first off, a blowfly is going to go through a complete metamorphosis. So here what you have is, here is the egg. Okay. Then it's going to go into larva. Now these have 3 different stages of larva. These are called instars. So this is instar 1. This is instar 2. This is going to be instar 3. And pretty much how you can determine that is going to be based on some of the structures of the animal. Okay. So we will get into that in a second. But first off, like I said, female is going to deposit about 50, give a chemical signal, allow others to deposit. They're going to deposit in warmer openings, things like that. And then it's going to go through this complete process. Now, a little to tell you about blowflies. Like I said, you're going to have these different stages. So here are all these stages. This was what's called insect succession. Pretty much these successions, these stages of what this goes through. So it's a complete metamorphosis, going from larva, or I guess egg, to larva, all the way to an adult. If you look at these pictures, this is a completely different structure as a male from a larva. Okay. Humans do not go through a complete metamorphosis. As we are born, we are pretty much the same. We just grow and develop. We don't change for the most part. I mean, we do have some changes, but we don't grow wings, arms, antennas, things like that. We are born with everything. We just develop them. Okay, so that's a little bit difference between humans and a fly, I guess. But here's a chart here. So you will need to know this. You will be asked questions on your quiz about this, as far as the different instars here, or larvas here, prepupa, and then finally adult, as far as size, color, appearance, duration of the phase, how long does it take, and then characteristics. So that is what you need to look and understand. I'd make sure you either print that out or write that into your notebook. So looking into this, I want to talk about a little bit of the structures here. Okay, so blowfly larvae use these hooks here. Okay, these hooks here are going to pretty much be on the anterior or the front of the larva, and those hooks are going to kind of just feed the tissue into the mouth. So it's kind of located on the front. They act as teeth, It's just going to hook on and kind of just continue to feed the decomposing flesh towards the mouth. Then you have this structure here. This is an important structure here. This is called the crop. Okay. The reason why this is important, one, is because it helps determine what stage the larva is in. You can only see it in stage 2. Stage 3, there's so much fat around it, you aren't going to be able to see it. And also, it adds importance because there's no digestion that happens. Okay, so in the crop, there's no digestion that happens. So in these phases, you're going to be able to take DNA from whatever's in there, also toxicology from whatever's in there. So it's going to provide a lot of evidence about the decomposition of the body. So going into the more into the morphology, I want to talk about the different instars. Okay, remember you have 3. So you have egg, larva 1 or instar 1, larva 2, instar 2, larva 3, instar 3, and then you go into pupa and then finally adult. Okay. So first off, I want to talk. So first, larva phase. Now remember, if we go back here, these larvae are going to have these hooks or the mouth here on the front. Okay. Well, here, this is the rear end. Okay, this is their posterior side. So the first larva is going to have this horseshoe structure called a spiracle. These slits here in these in this structure are called spiracle slits. Pretty much what happens, or what you need to know, is that this is how they breathe. Okay, so through this structure here, this is how they breathe. So what that means is that they are eating with their face and their butts in the air, and they're able to breathe. So this allows them to be able to eat and breathe at the same exact time. Which would make sense if they're burrowing with their face into the decomposing flesh, their butt in the air, or their posterior in the air, then that's exposed to the air that allows them to breathe. So instar 1 or larva 1, you have this horseshoe spiracle here. Larva 2 or instar 2, you have 2 ovals here that are going to be these spiracles. And same thing, these slits here are the structures in which they're going to get air through. And then finally, in star 3, larva 3, you have 3. So here's a picture here for larva 3. So they are kind of burrowing in until they reach a point. Now, once they reach a point here in star 3, they're going to stop eating. Here, they're going to grow. Once they grow to a certain size, they're going to molt their skin. Then same thing. So in star 1, they grow, get to a certain size, molt, become bigger, or allow for more room for growth. So therefore, in star 2, same thing. They'll eat, get to a certain size, molt their skin. Now they're in star 3. They'll eat and get to a certain size, then they stop eating. They don't molt their skin. The reason for that is because the next thing they're going to do is become what is a pupil. Okay, and that's when they turn to this brownish, darker color. All right, and pretty much what happens is the outside skin that is going usually molts is going to harden, and then when it hardens, it's going to cause protection. Now, the one thing you do need to know is that the pupils, okay, each of these are going to leave the body. Okay, so they leave the body and try to find a dark, dry space in order for it to hatch. Okay, so it's kind of similar to that of like a cocoon of a butterfly, where the cocoon is finds a spot, stops eating, stops doing everything, and then in the process of metamorphosis into a butterfly. Well, this is metamorphosing into a fly. Okay, so the pupa does leave the body and find a spot. So forensic investigators need to make sure that they collect evidence from that, mainly because it allows an understanding that there's enough time for the body's been dead long enough that the fly has completed one cycle. Okay, now depending on the number of pupas, that will kind of determine how many cycles kind of gone through. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much your blowflies. Okay, so instar 1, 2, 3. You will need to know those eggs, pupas, and then finally adults. Okay, so the adults being the last part. Now these eggs hatch in about 24 hours. The one thing I do want you to know is that there are some things as far as some environmental conditions that will affect this, such as the temperature. The hotter the temperature, the more activity you're going to get. The colder the temperature, the less activity you're going to get. Also, blowflies do not lay eggs at night. So if the body is dead at night, and then blowflies will only lay eggs during the day. So using the insect succession to create a PMI, that may be a little bit difficult if the body was to die at night. So once again, just like you were doing with forensic botany, you're going to be collecting the evidence and then also applying that to the stages of decomposition of the body. So it's just to help make a best accurate PMI possible. All right. Other flies that we're going to talk about. Okay, house flies. All right. Houseflies here, you have these kind of racing stripes to say. These houseflies are important to know because they do provide a lot of information about a crime scene, as these flies are more attracted to kind of sweet food sources, or the food sources are different than that of decomposing body. They deal more with sugar, sweat, blood, urine, feces. The importance of that is pretty much if there's been some sort of torture, neglect, restraints, stuff like that, that these flies can help determine. Then you have flesh flies. First off, house flies, a little smaller than blowflies. Then you have flesh flies, a little bit larger. Okay, they often are gray with longitudinal stripes here on the thorax, abdomen having a checkerboard pattern. Okay, and they will simply feed on flesh. That's pretty much nothing too crazy about them, but I do want to talk here about these coffin flies. Now, coffin flies will help determine where the body was. Was the body buried? Was the body wrapped in anything? Stuff like that. And the reason for that is because these are so small that they would get inside coffin. Therefore, that's why they're called coffin flies. So these flies would actually get inside a very small space. And Dr. Haskell observed in the Casey Anthony murder trial that the body was in the car for several days, simply because of the evidence of coffin flies. So the coffin flies can get into very small, tight areas. The house flies are going to help in that of the understanding if there was some sort of torture, neglect, abuse, anything like that, because of their food source is a little bit different. It's not actually of the decomposition of the body, but it is of the fluids, or I guess I should say. And then the other kind of big animal that we're going to be looking at, that of beetles. Okay, we're not talking about, Paul McCartney and those beetles. We're talking about bugs. Okay, these bugs, first off, they have two sets of wings, one to kind of protect in the outer layer, and then the second being the ones that cause them to fly. The larvae are different and easier to look at because they have what are feet. They have about 3 pair of feet for the beetles. And then they go through a complete metamorphosis as well. Now, there's a lot of different beetles that are going to happen, and simply they arrive after the flies, just simply because of the different types of food that they are going to want to eat. Okay, so instead of instead of larvae for flies, you're going to have what are grubs for beetles. You go through a complete metamorphosis as well. So once again, applying the time it takes to go through this, what's evident on the body, and then you can create a um, a uh, a PMI using that. Okay. Um, what else? What else? I think that's pretty much it. Now, understand that there are these animals, these insects, flies, things like that. They're going to lay eggs, but they're not alone. There's also other animals: ants, bees, wasps. And then if you get into other animals as well, carnivores, such as like a coyote or uh, a vulture, birds, things like that, those that are going to prey on the decomposing flesh as well. So they're not alone, but these animals go through this process and allows for forensic entomologists to create a good post-mortem interval or a PMI. So they do have to worry about some predators. So either eating the eggs or eating them. So here's a example of some of the different beetles. So you will need to know this as well. There's many different beetles here. So it has the preferred food here. So it goes through that, and you can see that a lot of them maggots, maggots, maggots. Therefore, the fly maggots are pretty much their food source. So that's another reason why they arrive after. So you can go here as far as when they arrive, and then notes as well. So you will need to be and understand the blowfly stages, the different beetles, as I'll ask questions about that. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. That's part two. We will finish the chapter next time, looking at how to estimate a PMI, processing a crime scene, and that will be it. And we'll finish that. All right. Uh, Take care, enjoy, have a nice day.